Scream if you want to go faster. A stage play by Megan Raynor. Fairground sounds...
Hang on, Al, we haven't introduced the actors yet, so I'm just going to do that first. Sorry, I was muted, so I do apologise, but we'll just go through the actors. I'm going to be playing Annie. David's going to be playing Dad. Rhiannon's going to be playing Rose. Alex is going to be playing Robbie in Daniel's absence, and Al is going to be, well, he's already started actually. Al is going to be reading the directions. You can start again now, Al. Thank you.
Scream if you want to go faster. An extract concept of a stage play by Megan Raynor. Fairground soundscape, rides, music, screaming.
Scream if you want to go faster. I can't hear you.
When I tell people that I grew up on a fair, I usually get a fuck ton of questions about whether people ever died on the rides or if I had a pet elephant with massive ears. No, Karen, I've never seen an elephant fly, but I have seen someone get fingered on the dodgems. It wasn't pleasant, nor was it suitable for a Disney film. I tend to brush over the death thing and tell them about the pet duck I had called Rio, named after the legend that is Rio Wellard. If you know, you know. He was bright yellow, and we kept him in a manky washing up bowl on a shelf above the toilet, surrounded by the soggy crusts we brought back from him in our lunch boxes. I don't tell them that his most recognisable feature was the metal hook gouged into the top of his head. My dad operated Twisted, this giant purple beast of a ride. It had a central column with like 4 extended arms that each had 3 smaller arms attached to them. Am I making any sense? And on the end of these 3 arms, the 4 large arms circle clockwise while the smaller arms threw you twisting round and round in all different directions, hence Twisted. People said it was the scariest ride on the fair, but they clearly hadn't seen the trippy and deformed attempts of Disney characters on the side of the teacups. Dopey looked like he was going to be swallowed by Snow White's tits. The only real perk of Twisted was the amount of shit we collected that fell off when people were riding. Sunglasses, phones, wallets, but mainly shoes, really. Dad had a rule. We had to write down in this little burgundy book the date we found the items and keep them in this big plastic box for at least a month. And after that month was over, Rose and I got the all clear to take what we wanted. It was like Christmas, just with more chance of verrucas. Hands down, the best moment of my childhood was managing to nab a pair of Nike Air trainers in baby pink from the stash. I got the size 7 first and then counted down the days before I was allowed to take the size 8. I think my left foot is a bit disfigured from ramming it into the size 7, but 12-year-old me was buzzing off her prepubescent tits. Dad was a proper stickler for health and safety and doing things properly. None of the other operators really gave a fuck. Before everything opened, he'd run the ride 5 times with no one on while checking all the mechanics. Then me or Rose would take it in turns for what he called the manned spin.
Rose, get out here. Need to take it for the manned spin.
Twisted was a she and the most important woman in Dad's life. I'm not sure why he christened her with a vagina, but he did, and that's all we know.
I don't feel good, can't Annie?
Annie did it last night. Off your pop.
Please, Dad, I'm on my period.
Rose has PCOS, which stands for polycystic ovary syndrome. I hope I got that right. It basically means she bleeds like a haemophiliac and has to wear these jumbo nappy pads.
For God's sake, Rose, I don't need to hear about that. Just get on with it.
Dad didn't even let us have our tampon packets on display. We had to keep them in our room in the bottom of our wardrobe. We also had a separate bin bag outside the caravan for the used ones that became affectionately known as the blob bag. By us, but not Dad. There was no real purpose for the man's test spin. He said it was something about weight distribution, but I think it was really just cheaper for Dad if we died rather than an unsuspecting fairground goer. This turned out to be the case when on Tuesday, March 19th, 2014, we sadly lost my sister Rose as she was flung 10 metres into the air, crashing on top of the hooker duck stand after a failure in the restraint mechanism. She died at the scene from internal bleeding. I'm going to hell, aren't I? My therapist says I use dark humour as a way to deflect from the shame of my intrusive thoughts. I'd like to think that really God's hand just slipped when he was pouring in that sweet, sweet, funny juice. Not to be mistaken for Fanny juice. God was generous with that too. She also says I struggle with my verbal filter. I only saw my dad on the ride the one time. He'd never do the man spin himself. He said he needed to be on the control board in case anything went wrong, which, I mean, fair, but I was also pretty capable of hitting the big red stop button. He only trusted us with the things he didn't want to do, like cooking and cleaning and emptying the blob bag.
You've been using those bloody hair thingamywhatsits.
Thingamawhatsits. Dad's adopted phrase for anything related to the female species. My curlers? Yes, don't I look radiant, Father?
Did you switch them off?
Yes.
Are you sure? I don't want to come back to this house in ashes.
He never referred to it as a caravan. It was always our house. I don't think he could ever admit to himself this was actually where he lived. I am sure they're off.
I know what you're like. You'll just be saying that. You won't have bothered bloody checking.
He'd then grunt his way into mine and Rose's room and spend a good 5 minutes crouching down to check every electrical device I owned. 10 points if he whacked the back of his head on my shelf when he stood up.
Fuck! Fucking shit fuck!
I'd usually switched everything off ahead of time of this predictable ritual, and he'd sheepishly reappear and change the subject. He was never wrong, Dad. I knew one time he must have found my bullet under my bed because his face was a vibrant shade of, I really wish I hadn't seen that, and he couldn't make eye contact with me for weeks.
Annie, what is this?
He was holding me grinder up as if it were a bomb. Fuck, fucking shit, fuck. Oh, I wondered where that went. I was trying to stall while I came up with something that wouldn't result in my immediate death.
Well?
It's something you use for me face powder. Girly things, Dad, you wouldn't understand. Girly things, I know. I hurt myself too.
You use it for your face powder?
Yeah, you know those powders that come in little balls. You have to use it to smush it down so you can apply it easier. I purposely avoided the word grind as I didn't want to risk triggering any knowledge Dad might have about smoking the dope, as he called it. Luckily for me, Dad was the beigest shade of beige, so I managed to escape with both eyeballs still in their sockets. You know what the most stupid thing is about all of this? That now I can't leave the house without checking every pissing plug socket. 10 points if I whack my head on something when I stand up. I tell Raquel that it feels like there's a tiny version of my dad somewhere managing to live rent-free up there.
I don't want to come back to this house in ashes.
Did you know some people don't actually hear a voice in their heads? It's just images and words, but no sound. Like they just lay there in bed and they hear nothing. Silence. Can you imagine silence? Do you think that would be bliss or really fucking lonely? When you think about it, it's incredible. You can talk over everything you see and hear and feel, and no one else can listen in. That's one of the only things truly sacred to you, isn't it? Your thoughts. Fuck. Can you imagine if it were transcribed? Everything we ever thought, and we shat them out like receipts. But then there's times when I want nothing more than to just fucking strangle that voice, you know? Sometimes, shit, this is going to sound mental, but sometimes I grab my own throat when it gets too loud, I suppose, to try and make it stop. It's pretty primal, really, if you think about it. Or sometimes I dig my fingers into my arms until I'm covered in these little white crescent indents. Raquel says I do it to ground myself, but I think she's just trying to make me feel less like a nut job. I've never like properly self-harmed. Rose did a few times. She absolutely hated if she knew I knew, but sisters have this weird kind of sixth sense. Rose?
Yes, Fanny?
She called me Fanny ever since we discovered the word in a copy of Cosmo in the doctor's waiting room when I was about 13. I think we were there because of her tsunami periods, actually. We got on to the bit where the readers send in their erotic story submission, and Rose read one to me in breathy, whispered snorts of laughter. Little does she know that I ripped that page out when she went into her appointment and used it as wank material for months after. You did the dirty, didn't you?
I did not do the dirty, you perv.
Little did she know she had a giant jizz stain on her Joni jeans. What's that on your leg then?
Ice cream.
It's October.
Sorry, who rang the ice cream police?
No one, but they did ring the spunk police.
Anna, you are vile, vile, vile.
I was a bit hurt that she didn't tell me it was going to happen. I was sad I wasn't involved in the ceremonious picking of the condoms from Sabres or choosing a thong from Primark that didn't scream, I chose this thong especially for our first time, but also didn't scream, you're probably dick number 87. This is how I wished our sisterly bond was like, and I was probably very jealous that it wasn't my Joni jeans covered in jazz. Rose never really seemed interested in boys either. Dodge and Dave definitely looked at me tits just then. Everyone on the fair was defined by which ride they operated.
Dodgem Dave looks at everyone's tits.
Yeah, but he's never looked at mine before, which means they must be growing, right?
You can see that in the mirror. You don't need him slobbering over them to show you that.
Do men actually do that? Slobber on boobs? I was actually quite turned on by this.
I don't know, Annie. Men are disgusting, so yeah, probably.
Me and Rose took very different stances when it came to the male species growing up. Rose automatically assumed every man was like Dad and was only really after a woman to make him shepherd's pie and pick pubes from the toilet seat. Whereas I was fascinated by men, especially men who were nothing like Dad. If he made politically incorrect jokes or didn't wear unbranded trainers. Better still if he smoked rollies or did drugs or had tattoos. The uglier and smudgier the tattoo, the better. Any mention of illegal activity got me wet. Could have been selling pirated copies of Shrek 4 in the pub toilets, but it still was something different, something with a bit of risk, someone who coloured out of the lines. Robbie was the first boy I fucked, and he ticked all of those boxes. I met him when I was 14 and he was 19, which is definitely super illegal, but at the same time, it added to his I'm a fuck up kind of charm. He worked on the Jumping Frog, so was known as Froggy by most people, but he liked it when I called him Robbie, which made me feel extremely special.
Oi, Annie, is it?
Yeah. I then giggled and snorted and stopped, flung out of my jumper, which I not so subtly wiped with my sleeve, which also then got snotty.
Can you help me with the cash up?
Yeah, sure, no problem, absolutely. Okay would definitely have been a reasonable response.
Cheers.
I came and joined him in the little perplex screen ticket booth and began working through the red metal box of coins and fivers while he strolled through his phone. Busy night, eh?
Not too bad.
Supposed to chuck it down tomorrow, though. Shameful move to the weather made by Annie.
Yeah, I think so.
He still didn't look up. I heard Tony is thinking of upping his price by 50p. I was really stooping low now.
Didn't know that.
I gave up at this point and continued to count in silence, jotting down the total on an orange post-it note because it felt too awkward to speak after so much time in silence.
That was quick. You're like Einstein or some shit.
I giggled again. minus the snot this time. Oh, it's nothing, just good with numbers, I guess.
What else are you good with?
He winked. My stomach twisted and my fanny fluttered. Wouldn't you like to know, is what I wish I'd said. But instead I just stood there gulping up at him, grinning like a nutcase.
You're pretty fit up close.
Oh, I had an internal meltdown. How much of a munter do I look from far away? You're pretty... I meant to carry on with fit yourself, but my mouth dried up and my tongue betrayed me, and this is all I could spew out. My face flushed and I could feel the sweat seeping through me snot-stained jumper. This is not how I'd imagined this conversation happening.
You're funny. Come around mine tomorrow, yeah?
Okay, cool. Yeah, that would be awesome. I'll see you tomorrow at yours. One with the orange gas tank, yeah? Not sure how I know that. Yeah, cool. Tomorrow. See you. Okay, would have again been a reasonable response. I left his caravan the next evening with blood in me Primark knickers and jizz on me Joni jeans and the same Cheshire cat grin plastered on me face. It had hurt, and he definitely didn't know what the clip was, but I felt like I had accomplished something. I relished in the fact that it was in the back of a grubby caravan with a man 5 years older than me who had "love is thicker than blood" tattooed on his chest, and his mouth and his penis tasted weirdly stale. It was disgusting and messy and reckless. It was everything Dad wasn't, and I was living for it. Rose, my fanny doesn't look quite right.
What do you mean it doesn't look right?
I don't know, there's these all little pink bubbly things.
It's probably just a skin tag or eczema or something.
Can you have a look?
I don't love you that much.
Rose, come on, please. I just want to know whether I need to get it checked or not. I'd look at yours.
Because you're a perv. Fine, take a photo of it and WhatsApp it me.
Why, so you can set it up as your screensaver?
No, so I don't have to physically put my head between your flaps.
This was pretty funny for Rose. What was less funny was her face when she opened the photo.
Fanny, I think you've got warts.
After the NHS website assured me I wasn't going to die, this weird sense of pride started to creep in. Yes, it was minging and itchy, but it felt almost like a souvenir of the fact I'd been reckless and dirty. Rose was less proud and escorted me to the GUM the next day, followed by a trip to Savers to bulk buy condoms. Not the sisterly bonding experience I'd first hoped for, but it was something. I never mentioned a word of this to Dad. He'd have either projectile vomited or got me measured up for a chastity belt. Dad didn't look anything like Robbie or the rest of the men who worked on the fair. He definitely did not look like a man who would actively choose to live in a caravan either. I've always thought he had a bit of serial killer vibe about him, actually. Kind of in the same way the IT technicians at school did, those ones who just play World of Warcraft all day and just tell you to try switching the computer on and off, that kind of vibe. The sort of man you wouldn't be surprised wanked over soft animals. I feel like I need to clarify that, actually. He never laid a hand on me or Rose or our soft toys. Sometimes I could tell he wanted to, but he didn't. That's why he always had his hands in his pockets. I used to wish he had. I haven't got daddy issues. Well, I do, but I mean, I used to think it would make things easier, that I'd have felt less guilty for hating him so much if I had bruises I could account for it. When people asked what happened to him, I said he'd had a heart attack, which is kind of true. Rose, get up. Rose, please, you need to get up.
What's wrong?
I couldn't respond to this in a way that made sense, so I just grabbed her hand and silently led her out the caravan towards the fair site.
Annie, what the fuck is going on? I'm in my pyjamas.
They were Gryffindor ones. I know she's a Hufflepuff, though.
What the fuck? What the actual fuck? Dad!
I'd often imagine what it would be like to find him dead. I'd play out the different scenarios in my head. Cancer, car crash, the standard. But what I haven't actually dealt with, even in my sick head couldn't have come up with. Saw his bare feet, bare and grubby, dangling just above the metal flooring, and I remember thinking that I don't think I'd ever seen his naked feet before, and they looked strangely boyish and innocent. Maybe I focused so much on his feet to block out the rest of it. Like one of those paper folding games where you take it in turns to draw the body parts of someone, not knowing how the final picture will look until you unfold it. I wish I'd been able to turn the top half back over. His feet were not the only thing bare. He was completely naked and strapped into one of the seats. His balls were squished up and sticking out weirdly at the bottom of the harness. His head and arms flopped limply in a way that reminded me of the Guy Fawkes we made at primary school, but I knew that no more scrunched up balls of the Daily Mail could revive Dad.